Round two, baby, let's go. All the parts are here. I'm so excited to install this new wheel and all the little parts that go into making installing this new wheel possible. So let's take a look at what just arrived. Here are all the new parts in their bags, so you can see the part numbers in case you're trying to follow along. This is a new steering wheel. I haven't even unboxed it yet. I'm so excited. So we've got all kinds of things that are gonna go in here. This little column shield looks like it's not painted. I'll paint it myself. Mine was black, and I don't even think I took it off the old steering wheel, which doesn't matter because they're both garbage at this point. The wheel hub with tilt and telescoping column. We've got a lock ring spacer, a new horn button, which also looks like it's got the emblem on it, which is nice that it's got a fresh emblem, also unpainted, so I think I'll have to paint that black. I'm not positive. Horn contact screw. Let's see, I don't know what ST stands for. Wheel mount screw. Let's see, what's that look like? Can't even see the bag. Telescope lock ring. That's that part I thought was initially that I was going to keep. It's this thing that goes around tilts. I was talking about painting it. Turns out I won't have to, so I got a new one as part of the kit. Got a horn contact, which is shiny and new, so that should actually solve some of my horn problems. And then a horn contact retainer. That's that clip that I bought extra outside of the kit. And that advice that this stuff was going to be broken. So let's get everything out of the box and get started. Step one and also issue one. I just pulled the wheel hub out, and this is the part. And this is actually an issue that the guy in the tutorial had too. I just thought since that was like years old, they would have fixed it by now. But anyway, this is my new hub, and this is the back of it. And what I want to do basically is take this spring piece with the horn part on the top and drop it right into there. It lines up nice. I'll hold it up for a second. Lines up nice. It drops right in, so that piece comes through, and the holes line up. The only problem is those three holes, just like his in his video, aren't threaded. So I'm gonna try maybe the screws they gave me. Oh wait, I have the old screws. I was thinking maybe they're like self-tapping. I'm gonna see if I can make them self-tap, but gently. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to go buy a tap and actually tap threads into those three holes myself, which shouldn't be such a big deal. It's another tool to buy, and I've never done it before. It seems like this might be successful, actually. So here's one of the little screws that needs to go into those three holes. And I put that piece on there and started just cranking on it with a screwdriver, and it actually looks like I'm having some success. This might just be soft enough. The threads on the screw still look fine. They're not broken off after that attempt. And it looks like it was kind of just self-tapping. So I'm just gonna go for it. Just kind of muscle it in there. It's not like this piece is gonna be under much force anyway. I think these threads will tap into that hub themselves. I don't think I need to go buy a tap. That threaded right into those threads I just cut. That's awesome. So like I said, not ideal that those didn't come threaded, and you can see there's some play in this piece. Kind of wobbles around. Those screws are not coming out though, they're really in there. And I was able to get them to hold together. I mean, there's a little play, but this is all gonna be part of a bigger system where it's pressed into place, and there's that spring on the back kind of holding this against. I'm actually not all that worried about it. I wish I could thread them a little further, but what was happening is it's taking so much force to push in to cut the threads deeper that I was just gonna strip out the top of those screw heads, and I wasn't gonna be able to put them in or out. So I'm gonna stop there with that little bit of play. If I totally hate it once I get it in the car, I'll pull everything out and buy a tap and actually cut proper threads. But it seems fine. The screws themselves aren't damaged. The threads on those seem totally intact. With that satisfactorily on, what I'm gonna do is put this little assembly. This has got a spring, some little plunger, and then that little plastic collar with a little nub on it, and that's supposed to drop down into this hole where I lined up the plastic through the metal body. So I'm gonna just drop it in there and get that, see if I get some light on it, that little nub to line up with that hole. I'm gonna push it in, and then I guess rotate this whole thing. Maybe I just push in with my thumb and then pull it to the side with a screwdriver. There's a little notch that's like an L shape, and I'm trying to push that nub into the L so it retains it in place. There it goes. So now that'll stay in place, and I can push the button. Oh, that'll stay in place, I said. Let's try again. Push it in. I really need to push in with one hand and pull to the side with another. Okay, so I should be able to push in on that. And the horn contact button now stays in place, doesn't all spring out everywhere. So that looks like it went okay. I've got this little retainer clip that I'm replacing. I wish I would have paid better attention to the way the broken one looked, but I can see there's a gap, and there's something there and something there. So I'm just gonna slide this on, and hopefully it'll just line up and click into place. There we go. I don't think it really matters which way this is facing. I could be wrong about that, and if I am, we'll have to take this back apart, but I think we can just slide this on and then thread this nut that was on there before to press it down into place. So now those will hold together, and obviously I just did that finger tight. I need to actually tighten it up with a socket. Oh, see, this is where I didn't have a socket big enough, so I'm gonna do it with an adjustable. Okay, that feels about as tight as it was when I removed it. Horn button's still clicky. This thing feels fine. That I tapped the self screws, they're really not bouncing that much because that spring is pressing everything into place. So that feels pretty good. If I'm gonna lose a part today, it's probably gonna be this little snap ring that I'm about to try and put on now that I've got this nut tightened down. I guess this just goes around the outside of it. Maybe I can just press it on from the front. After some time with those little screwdrivers, I was able to get that little nut in the center, or I don't know what that's called, locking pin reattached. I basically just used a big flathead to spread it apart, and then I sort of pressed it over the first thread here till it would just barely hang on its own, and then I took a small flathead and with my thumb on it just pressed each side over, and now it's on there just as a last resort to keep that nut from coming off the end of this spindle in the weird event that it did somehow, come loose. It's threaded on there tight. I don't think it's going anywhere, but it's a good little security measure. Hopefully if that were to happen, I would feel some real rickety steering way before I actually had the wheel come off in my hand. Here's the little casing that's gonna cover the exposed part of the steering column. I lined it up, made sure everything's ready for this to go on, but this is light gray. Feels like it's a nice surface for paint, so I'm gonna go ahead and spray paint this black so it matches the rest of the steering column, and then give it as much time as I can feel patient to dry before I start scuffing it up and trying to put it back in the car. I'm actually glad I painted that, and I think it's gonna look really nice when it dries. So I've got it inside where it's a little warmer to dry. It's a little cold out tonight. Here's the horn button, and this is kind of neat. So you can see it's this weird metal on the outside. The button, the back is actually just resting on each other. It comes apart in 3 pieces. So I've got this metal piece and then the plastic emblem. I'm gonna take them apart, and that gives me just this metal piece that I can paint. So I should probably just paint it black. I'm curious if it would look kind of cool white. I'm thinking probably not. I think it'll probably hold up to wear and tear, but yeah, because it'd be white on chrome, wouldn't look very good. I'm gonna paint this black and set it inside to dry as well with the other part. All right, as you can see, I've got it on this trash cardboard box. I also slid a little piece of wood underneath, and that's so I can pick it up and take it inside to dry on my counter without damaging it and without getting any paint on my counter. Here are those 2 pieces that I painted. They both look really nice. They've been inside drying. I have this little fan that I set up above them, and I'm gonna go put them in the car. This is the freshly painted part. It's got a little indent here that I think lines up with this indent here. And I'm hoping that it doesn't matter which orientation this is in, but I'm gonna line that up like that. Just let it rest for a second. And then I'm gonna take my steering wheel, and it's got 6 holes that should line up as well. I'm gonna press this in so I can push against it and just see if I can get a couple of these screws started. Okay, I'm just putting that in super loose till I get all of these lined up. That one went in okay. Okay, 2 down. All right, looks great. Already so excited about this project. New wheel is in. New cover looks great. The black came out really nice with the paint. So now all I gotta do is put all those other innards in around the horn and the cover on the front. I actually like how it looks with this exposed so much. I know I can't leave it that way, but it's pretty cool. I've made a little bit of a mistake, and it's a pretty easy fix, but here's one of the next pieces to go on. It's the lever that actually engages and disengages the telescoping feature. It's got this little notch here, and as you can see on that cover that I painted, there's also a little notch. Now, my notch goes from here to about there behind the chrome, and when I slide this on, right, it's good for a little while, but I want to be able to open it all the way beyond there, and I don't want to just be scratching into this piece. So what I'm going to do is take these 6 pieces back off and actually rotate that housing so that this full indent is exposed above the wheel. I just didn't know to do that beforehand, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. I had to actually take everything back off to reset this, so I had to remove the pieces I had before, the steering wheel and this housing, which I just dinged, and then I had to take this clip off again, which is annoying. It was a lot easier with a pair of needle nose pliers. So my neighbor was walking by and let me borrow his, which was really nice. So I took this off, and then I had to actually get my steering wheel puller back out. Even after I broke this loose with my adjustable, it was nice and pressed like it was supposed to be, which is good news. I had to use the steering wheel puller again, remove this thing, orient it as best I could. I actually think I could have gone one more thread counterclockwise, but it'll be fine. There's enough tolerance built in. And then put it back on, tighten it back down, get that clip back on. That's the only annoying part, is this little clip is kind of hard to get on and off. But now we're back into the position we were in before, and I think I should be able to go ahead and resume where I left off before, which is setting this in place. You can see all my holes line up, and now I've got that divot at the top for that part of the telescope lever, that part right there, to sit in and rotate back and forth. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the wheel back on like it was before, and then we'll pick up where we left off before I discovered my mistake. Joke's on me. It does matter if this is off by just a little bit, because then you get the steering wheel on. When the wheels are perfectly centered, the whole steering wheel is just a little bit crooked. So I had to take this clip off, move the nut, and use the steering wheel puller a 3rd time to reset this. So now, because there's only, it might be keyed where it can go on this way, or a notch, or a notch, or a notch, but there's only so many holes. And so when the holes are off by a little bit, when the wheels are centered, everything's off by a little bit. So it does matter. You got to get this thing on so that the notches at the bottom, like this little recess, is actually level with the bottom when the wheels are straight forward. Not that big a deal. I feel like I can do this in my sleep now that I've done it 3 times, but time to actually put the wheel on for good. We are back to where I thought we were ready to do this. I've got my telescoping lock right here, and the notch is now in the right place for it to actually go side to side, so that's nice. I'm going to take this star screw that was in there before. This is the one from the original. The kit doesn't come with a new one. And just sort of put it into place with that. It's not one to thread super smoothly. This screw came out of this hole, so I'm not sure why it's not wanting to thread. Anyway, now I'm in a position where I've got, when this lever is all the way to one side, I've got holes that line up with my star. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop those 2 screws back in and test out. This should, oh, I've got it too tight now because my tilt telescope is locked. So I actually want to loosen this a little bit. But I'm gonna get it to a position where when it's where it should be locked, I'll put my 2 screws in, and then I should be able to loosen it and unlock it. So let me loosen this a little bit and then drop those 2 screws in. That took me a good bit more figuring out than I would have liked, but basically I got the star nut in there, and what I did was put this switch all the way at lock, and then I found when I tighten this to a certain point, it locks the telescoping so that when I push in, it doesn't go. So when I got it to where this and this star nut were locked at the same time, I found a set of these holes around the outside that lined up with the inside of these little gear teeth, and then I just tightened these 2 screws in, and I found it helped to pull this telescoping switch toward me so that the threads could catch. And I tightened it so now I can push in and it doesn't go anywhere, and when I flip this big lever, it loosens it enough that it does telescope. So the telescoping is back the way it was. It doesn't actually matter for me that much. I actually like mine kept all the way out like that, just for more room for my arms. Be glad to see it back working the way it should be. So I've taken that new horn plunger button and I've lined it up with that piece that was sort of hanging there, and I just put 2 of the long screws in to hold it in place while I show you this, while I do the last one. So I've got this spiky little washer that's going to deform to hold this in place. I'm just going to fit it over this long screw, and then line up. There's actually 3 holes. There's 1, 2, and then inside of there is a hole that this screws threading down into. Cool. So now all 3 of those are anchored. Now I have to actually tighten them down, but that's going to hold in place, and that little plunger is right there. It's going to push the horn button behind here. So when I depress the horn, hopefully it'll go off. In that tutorial video I was talking about, he says like, oh, I'm so disappointed this didn't come with horn spacer rings. If you don't have these 2 little spacers, then your horn won't sound. And of course he was right. He was absolutely right. So right now the horn on the car doesn't actually work. I just need to order a couple of these little circular spacers with 3 little screw spots on them. And I'm hoping as soon as I order those, I should be able to pop the horn back off, put those in place, put everything back on, and have my horn working again. At this point, I've got my telescoping set to the resistance I want. I mean, it's maybe a little firmer than I would want, but it's doing okay. And then all 3 of these are lined up and they're in place for my horn contacts. So I wish I'd done this a little looser, but honestly I've adjusted it a few times, and this I think is as good as I'm gonna get it for today. My last step was just to take this piece that I painted earlier and set the little plastic emblem back inside with the coating behind, and that whole thing just snapped right into place. The first time I went for a little test drive with this all assembled, thinking that had just clicked into place, I went over a speed bump and the entire horn assembly fell out in my lap. Not the entire assembly, just the ring with the emblem and the little plastic piece behind it. So, you know, I sort of stashed it till I got home, and then I pulled the instructions out. There it came in the little baggie. And it turns out what I needed to do once I had finished painting and letting it dry was I laid down the little block of wood that it dried on with a cloth over top of it to protect the paint and the metal, and laid it face down, assembled everything again, and there were those 3 little studs in the back. Those are actually like sort of like half rivets. So I had to take a hammer and just tap them over till they deformed a little bit and spread out, and that held everything into place. And so it did fall out in my lap the first time. It doesn't just rest on there and click into place. You actually have to tap those over to permanently fix them into place after you finish painting. But that helped a lot, and now it feels a lot better. So now I've got my wheel. I can crack it open, slide it in and out, lock it again. It feels a little loose, this horn button, I'll say, but it is on there, and it looks so much better than it did before. Only thing left to do now is hook the battery back up and take it for a spin.